Hello and welcome to the Jackson Krieger Sports Podcast with Kyle. We don't really have a name yet, but we'll go with that. And let's just jump into
Working
it.
title.
We don't exactly working title. Let's just jump into it. We'll go with first things we're gonna start things off with is the Tom Brady situation. Figure Kyle, you're a big Patriots fan. You probably have a lot of thoughts on this. I think I'll just kick it off to you. What do you think about this? General thoughts about Tom Brady?
Well, the Brady conversation certainly doesn't make me happy.
Right.
I mean, it continues to go back and forth. Is he staying? Is he going? All the reports sound like he's going. He's out. To me, this all sounds like a negotiation process, and he's kind of trying to force the Patriots into a position to where they're drafting him weapons and getting him receiver help that he can have into the next year. Because we probably had the worst receiving core in the league last year. I mean, Edelman was obviously banged up, so that really hurt. But outside of him, we had nobody, especially once Josh Gordon was traded and the whole Antonio Brown situation, which was a mess. So I hope we get some more weapons. Obviously, our caps are at about $50 million this year, if I remember correctly. Which if you include Tom Brady's $30 million that he's asking for, that pretty much puts us at a couple extra players if we're bringing back Devin McCourty and Jamie Collins. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I still think he's going to end up coming back. Like, of all the options, I don't see him playing for Anthony Lynn at this stage of his career. Like, why would he listen to Anthony Lynn about anything? Um, and then what's the other one? The Las Vegas Raiders. I don't see him going to that Raiders show, man. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think the logical solution is just honestly the boring one that Tom Brady just stays with New England. It's boring for a casual fan, obviously for a Patriots fan, it's probably exciting. But yeah, I mean, just looking at his numbers, the numbers have been down. I think that that's a fair thing to say, and he's 43 years old. So it's like there is a chance. Listen, Brady has done nothing but just do things that we didn't think were possible. So is it possible he's going to continue to play at a high level in this period of time? Absolutely, it is. But it's also very possible that he'll just drop off a little bit. One thing you said about the receiving core, according to Pro Football Focus, they were last in the league in separation, which obviously is a big deal. So I do think that that's if he's going to stay with New England, I think they're probably going to have to invest in some weapons. I think that maybe with N'Keal Harry having a full training camp, although now we don't know with the coronavirus how long that'll be, but
Yeah.
right. But I think that that can definitely help. I mean, again, looking one number that definitely is shocking is the 6.6 yards per attempt, which I mean, that's worse than guys like Case Keenum, Josh Allen, Kyle Allen. Also worth mentioning, Brady has never been a big yards per attempt guy. But yeah, it's kind of one of those weird things where I feel like the only situation that I think really makes sense for both sides is New England. I mean, you bring up the Chargers and the Raiders. Personally, I don't know why the Raiders would move on from Derek Carr, who's on a very reasonable contract at this point. It's only $22 million, which I think is reasonable to get maybe have 1 or 2 years with Brady. But are they really a championship contender? I just don't know.
To me, we're gonna get into the quarterbacks in a second. I'll get into my Raiders tangent here in a sec.
Okay.
But yeah, I think I just don't think the whole lot of the idea of Brady leaving. I don't think it makes sense. I could see teams like why the Colts make sense because the Colts are desperate for a starter. They have just about a perfect roster besides him. They're ready to contend, but Jacoby Brissett's health and whether his level of quarterback plays is that of a Super Bowl winning quarterback is a whole different story. So that's a tough question to answer. I don't see how Tennessee makes a lot of sense to him. Why would they just let Ryan Tannehill go after the second half he had to then bring in Brady for 2 years and then start from scratch right where they were at 5 years ago before they drafted Marcus Mariota? It's going to be interesting to see. I still don't think he's leaving. I do think that there's a lot that went into that performance from him. The year before when we won the Super Bowl, we really transformed into like a really power running game with play action passes. Well, then James Devlin got hurt right away. Isaiah Wynn got hurt right away, and we kind of saw
Trent
that.
Brown.
Yeah, Trent Brown was gone, and we kind of actually saw that maybe Sony Michel is kind of mediocre, especially when he doesn't have those pieces in front of him. So that really hurt the passing game because we can't run the ball. And then Edelman was hurt just about from like week 5 on through the rest of the season. Your best receiver, who's the king at getting separation, can't
Right, Hall of
get
Famer.
separate. Yeah. Oh, geez. We'll see about that one. But yeah, I mean, he can't get separation because he's playing with like 3 injuries. We don't have Gronk for the first time in a while, and we're throwing to Matt Lacoste because we kept trying to cut costs. You know,
Hmm.
the Patriots have gone through this. Obviously, we're back into a Super Bowl winning phase, but from 2004 to 2000, what was it, 15? There was a lot of phases where Belichick's cost cutting maneuvers actually ended up hurting New England because there were bad players on the team. And as far as Brady goes, I don't think Brady's in a position where, like back in like the mid 2000s, he made Rashae Caldwell a Pro Bowl receiver. You know, I don't think
Right.
Brady's in a position anymore where he can make Rashae Caldwell a Pro Bowler. He can't make Philip Dorsett a Pro Bowler by any
Hmm.
means. Um,
Right.
so I think we're at a point now where we're kind of on this next phase of the career where he kind of has to have weapons. I don't think he's Peyton Manning 2016 like
Hmm.
pathetic, but he's at a point where he can't carry the team.
No, yeah, I mean that's a very good. It's interesting to see those two guys and how their careers have ended. Where Brady Manning actually did have the Max Kellerman fall off a cliff. Brady has very gracefully declined.
Yeah.
Uh, how about this for an idea? Now this is something that I thought of. It's not something that's getting talked about whatsoever. But just hear me out on it. What about Buffalo? And I think that I'm not sure if he wants to go to a team in his own division, but Buffalo, they could have him start, put Josh Allen in a backup role, let him sit behind Brady for a year or two, let him develop that way. You're competitive now. I do think Brady would be someone who could be better. Would that make any sense?
Well, it would make sense in the fact that he's staying close to his family that I guess is in Connecticut now. Um, I don't really know if I see him playing for like Sean McDermott. And I mean, I don't know what the Bills cap situation is like too. That's another question. Because isn't Tre'Davious White a free agent, or he's soon to be a free agent or something, isn't he?
I'm not exactly sure. I don't believe he's a free agent currently, but they're going to have to pay him at a certain point. The
Yeah, they
Bills
have.
currently third most cap space at 81 million.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah,
mhm.
I mean, I feel like they're also kind of bought into Josh Allen. Like weirdly, they're the only people that
Yeah,
are. Anyone outside of Buffalo is like, wow, this Josh Allen guy's not very good. He's not very accurate throwing the ball. But at the
right.
same time,
Mhm.
it seems like they're really in on him and like making this team work with him. The two teams that seem to, or I've heard these San Francisco rumors that I also don't think make sense. The team
Mhm.
to me that does make sense is the Colts because there's a very obvious fallout that Brady signs there, and then we can honestly trade back for Jacoby Brissett and probably get a better deal because
Yeah.
he's getting paid more now. And we'll draft a Jacob Eason type, draft a I don't want Jake Fromm, but that type of quarterback from the draft. Have Brissett as the starter, and I still think we'll be rather successful with Brissett behind center
Right. Yeah,
and
no, I
just
don't.
roll with that.
I think with New England, it is worth mentioning they did have one of the best defenses last year. They're not a terrible team by any means. I mean, going 12-4, they won more regular season games this year than last year. So, I definitely think that if I'm a New England Patriots fan, I'm not too worried. It's just such an interesting thing. I think that one of the things that does confuse me is that if Tom Brady is going to stay with New England, why hasn't the deal been done yet? I think something worth bringing up. I think part of the reason could just be he wants to get more money, but that's never really been Brady's MO. So that's the one reason why I think that maybe he could be leaving is because of that.
Yeah, and I still think at the end of the day, it's probably trying to strong arm them into signing players. Um, Austin Hooper's a big free agent that they can go and get. Eric Ebron's another guy they can go get. There's a couple good receivers. It's a great receiver draft,
Hmm.
and there's all these pieces that they can go get to help Brady out. I think he wants to see what their plan is, and he wants to see the plans of other teams because at the end of the day, if it's all about making money for him, then he can just have $1 million in LA because the Chargers pay him $75 million so that they can sell seat licenses. And so he'll just go sit on a beach in LA. He'll half-ass the rest of his career, and that'll be it. That doesn't really seem like what Brady wants to do. So I do think that he is coming back. He's just waiting to see what the Patriots do before he commits to anything.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I guess from here we can segue on over to the quarterbacks. I put together this little thing. I'm gonna try to get it up, or I'm gonna here's my plan. I'm gonna figure out who I think should get what, who's gonna go where, and then you tell me if it makes sense or it doesn't make sense. How does that sound?
That sounds good. I'm assuming we're
Okay.
not including Drew Brees in this, right?
Right. Drew Brees is not in this. I also, just because of space, I don't have Mariota, Dak Prescott, or Philip Rivers because I only had so much room. So
Gotcha.
I'll just start off with those three and then we'll get on to what I have here. Um, Mariota, I think he's going to go to Pittsburgh. I think this makes sense. I think he'll be a backup for Ben Roethlisberger, but someone who can start games if necessary. I don't think Tennessee is too. Maybe he'll stay there to be a backup, but I think it'd be better for both cases if he moves on to a better opportunity for him. And I think for Pittsburgh, I mean, I think they need a backup. I don't think Mason Rudolph is even a backup quality guy.
It's really interesting. So I was kind of like thinking about who I would pick where to as well as I was going through it. And I picked him or Winston. To me, is the guy. So Teddy Bridgewater laid out the perfect format to how to get a good payday and get back into a contention as a starting quarterback. Is that instead of jumping to the next job as quickly as you can and try and force your way, because Minnesota essentially was set to pay him, and then all of a sudden it didn't work out because of the injury. So instead of
Mm-hmm.
like forcing his way to a place as quickly as he can to get the next job and get the next starting job, we've seen guys like Tyrod Taylor and a bunch of other players do that. He went to an offensive mastermind as a head coach in Sean Payton. He bided his time. He got a chance to start. He looked really good in a really good offense. And now he's going to get a payday and another chance to start as a quarterback. I think Winston or Mariota is going to have that same opportunity. And I think one of them needs to take that opportunity, whether it's like the backup for the Rams, the backup for, go through the list here. Maybe the chance behind the Bears with Matt Nagy as the head coach. There's plenty of options here for backup quarterback. And
How about New England even?
yeah, that's even a possibility
Mm.
if they're looking for a backup quarterback. I don't see if Brady's paying $30 million, is getting paid $30 million. I don't see them
Right.
investing heavily in a backup quarterback, but I still see it as a possibility. Pittsburgh does make a lot of sense. You get 1 year of Ben Roethlisberger, who's kind of flirted with retirement for the most part throughout his past 5 years. So that makes
Mhm.
sense. I could agree with that one with Mariota.
Okay, and now we'll move on to Dak Prescott. Again, I think at least for 1 year, Dak Prescott is staying with Dallas. I don't see any way they don't at least franchise tag him. It seems very inconceivable to think that they would have a solid starting quarterback and get rid of him for nothing.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I can't imagine them letting him go under any circumstances to another team. Whether they pay, the thing is that they're asking for $40 million because they know Jerry Jones actually dumb enough to pay $40 million,
Right.
and he's going to be the one desperate enough to do any of this. The one curveball I can't take credit for it because I heard it from I think it was the Ringer NFL show or Bill Simmons podcast. Was there a
Just take credit for it. It's fine. Just
Okay.
pretend it's us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The one curveball that would be very Jerry Jones move would be Jerry Jones signs Brady.
Yeah, no, that would. I mean, that totally like. I do feel like if the Cowboys had a chance to get Brady, they might just do it. And I just hope it doesn't happen because you just have to make sure, like ESPN, just all the 24-hour coverage then of Tom Brady, Cowboys,
Oh
if that
man.
happened.
The Troy Aikman and Joe Buck crew would be in Dallas
Yeah.
every weekend. They'd be
Right.
in
No.
Dallas
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. And then one other one I have that's not on the board is Philip Rivers. Here's my thing. I think Philip Rivers ends up just going to broadcasting. I think that Philip Rivers is going to want to play, and then I think Philip Rivers is going to realize that nobody really wants him to be a starter, and he's not going to have the options that he wants, and is going to end up in a broadcasting booth.
That's interesting. I'm not really sure how I feel about Phillip Rivers being good at broadcasts, but now all of a sudden this is the niche where we pay quarterbacks a crazy amount of money to do it without ever
Right.
actually like putting like I've never seen Phillip Rivers in front of a camera like, oh wow, this guy looks really comfortable, But I
Mhm.
mean, I can see somewhat TV company paying for him to do that. I actually was thinking the Bucks, so I was thinking
Yeah.
1 to 2 years with the Buccaneers. Jordan Love gets time to see a guy who's been a professional for all this time. He gets to learn behind this professional quarterback in Bruce Arians' system. He gets time to develop, and then Jordan Love's ready to take the lanes, or whoever the Buccaneers end up drafting. That's just the guy I was kind of thinking is going to end up in Tampa.
Right. Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, there is some logic there. I definitely think that we're going to have to improve our tackle play if we do. Obviously, I'm a Bucs fan, so I say we. If, I think we'll have to improve our tackle play because I don't know about having the corpse of DeMar Dotson trying to protect Phillip Rivers, an immobile quarterback, especially with the system where it goes downfield so much. Obviously Bruce Arians is well known for getting his quarterbacks killed. But also, it does just seem like it would be the total Bruce Arians hire where Phillip Rivers has a career year with Bruce Arians. So there's some logic there. I could see it. But now we'll move on to the board. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm a master at paint. And so I'm going to draw each team's logo. So that way it'll be perfect for where I think they're going to go. Does that sound good?
All right, go for it.
Okay, so the New England Patriots. I'm going to have to do this from memory, too. So this might not be...
That is beautiful.
New England Patriots logo for Tom Brady. We've already talked about that. I think that's logical. We'll just move on from there. We have Jimmy Garoppolo. I think Jimmy G, no way he's leaving the 49ers.
I agree with that. Unless they can get someone really marquee, I don't see him going anywhere. And I think it's a list of like 5 guys that they would consider letting Jimmy Garoppolo go for. And I don't see any of those 5 guys going to the 49ers.
Yeah, I agree. I just think, I mean, why are you going to, like, I didn't think I thought he got way too much heat for the Super Bowl performance. I mean, he missed a couple of throws late, but I thought he was fine. He just led his team to a Super Bowl. I just think that unless they get an offer they can't refuse, I think they're sticking with Jimmy G. And then we'll move on to...
He was 2 yards away from hitting Emmanuel Sanders to win the whole thing.
Yeah,
it was right there. So I don't fault Jimmy G for that.
Yeah, and even go before that, he was inches away from hitting. I believe it was George Kittle for like just a quick first down, and that could have been the difference. So I mean, it was a game of inches for sure. And then we'll move on to Jameis Winston. Here's the thing: I was thinking about Winston, and personally, I said I would keep him if I'm in Tampa Bay, but I think I just have like battered woman syndrome at this point, where I'm just going to say I want to keep him forever. I do think that they're going to move on from him, and I was thinking, what about a team that maybe could use an entertaining quarterback, a team with not much of a fan base, and that is the San Diego Chargers. What if...
Los Angeles.
Right. I should not be doing that 3 years into their move. Well, yeah, what about the Los Angeles Chargers?
Still be at San Diego.
Seriously, this is probably more fans in San Diego.
Yeah,
go ahead.
So this is right on the money. So you said Mariota as the backup and Winston as the Chargers quarterback. And I wrote down Mariota for Chargers, Winston as a backup. And
gotcha.
Either one really makes sense. I can see Winston really jumping at that opportunity. He's gonna the Chargers are going to throw money at somebody, and somebody is going to jump at that opportunity. And they're going to live in LA. They're going to have, a pretty decent roster, honestly, around them, maybe besides the offensive line there. That is going to be really good around them. And not only that, once again, they're going to live in LA. And it's pretty much a clean slate because it's not really like you're going to get a lot of heat if you're bad because nobody watches the games anyways for LA Chargers. So who cares if you stink? I think it's a really good situation for Winston to really start over and revamp his career.
Yeah, I agree. And I think even with the offensive line, I mean, he's been playing with a subpar offensive line for most of his time in Tampa. It doesn't seem to... I mean, it affects him as much as it affects anybody, but he can move around more than you would think just watching his, some of his lowlights. It makes sense to me. I think that he's going from one great wide receiving core to another one in the Chargers. And I think that, again, I do think that the business side is going to come into play here. And Winston is the kind of guy who he's entertaining, and he's going to get people to want to watch for better or for worse. So I think that one makes sense. Moving on to Ryan Tannehill. So Tannehill is a guy who, if I'm the Titans, I'm keeping it. Again, that's one of those things where it just seems like Tennessee does not want to keep him. It seems like they've been looking to move on. So I'm going to say they will move on. And I think he's going to go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think that this is maybe wishful thinking on my part a little bit, but I think that this just makes a ton of sense because, for one thing, I think that he's in that Bruce Arians system that loves to throw the ball deep. Tannehill has never had a problem with being an athlete. His problem, for the most part, has been staying healthy, and he'll make dumb decisions sometimes. But he's definitely going to be a far upgrade in the decision making from Jameis Winston. I think that he is kind of the quarterback for a Bruce Arians system. And I think that if he doesn't get tagged by Tennessee, why wouldn't he want to go to Tampa Bay? I mean, they have the offense that can work with him, have great receiving, to have a coach that fits his skill set perfectly. It just makes sense for me unless he gets tagged by Tennessee.
Yeah, I ended up writing Titans, and this was a team that I had franchise tag for. At the end of the day, I think they might try and big game play here and try and get one of the bigger quarterbacks, but I do think they're going to strike out. Plus, I got to pay Derrick Henry, and I think that with all of that, they're going to end up saying that why not just give Tannehill the prove it year, let him see what happens, and then we'll just go from there. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I think that's what I would do. But also, what I've learned in doing this for a little over a year now is just because I would do something doesn't mean other teams would do it.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's decisions that seem obvious, don't get done. But that's just what I have. But that means that now the Tennessee Titans have a vacancy, and to me, there is no better fit than Teddy Bridgewater for the Tennessee Titans if they do not stick with Tannehill. I think that Bridgewater can fit that run heavy offense, throw on play action type team very well. It makes sense to me. What do you think?
I am all about Bridgewater to Tennessee. I actually think that'd be a really fun fit. I wrote Carolina in here for my team for Teddy Bridgewater, but that actually makes a lot of sense to me too. I really like him in Tennessee. I think like I said, that's a perfect fit. If they bring back Henry and also have Bridgewater, that's a really dynamic duo, and that's a team that I can see being really successful because he essentially does everything that Tannehill did really well last year. He plays really well out of play action. He takes care of the ball, and he's pretty accurate with his throws. So he's kind of like an upgrade to Tannehill while also, maybe not costing as much as Tannehill after Tannehill's like.
I missed that ending a little bit, but I think I got most of what you're saying. Yeah, I think the price is probably the biggest thing. I think that with you're gonna have to pay Derrick Henry. You have about $50 million in cap space, and so if you want to give him one of those big running back deals, if you're also going to give Ryan Tannehill a franchise tag, that's a lot of money. You'd save money going with Bridgewater, so I could see Tennessee doing that, and I think it would make sense.
Definitely.
So now,
yep.
Yeah, okay. So now I'll move on to there's two that we mentioned Derek Carr earlier and also Matthew Stafford. I think both of these guys are going to stay. I think that the Lions, there's been some speculation. I don't know how I'm going to draw a line. This is going to be a difficult one, but okay. Perfect. Okay. And then, oh, Jesus, what am I doing here? This is great podcasting, by the way, of just you listening to me.
High quality content.
About, drawing and paint. But go ahead. Say something while I draw.
Yeah, I think Matthew Stafford makes a lot of sense to stay. I do think he's probably the one guy that I've seen, despite his injury history, that it would take a first-round pick to trade. And I don't see a lot of teams, like, even with the first round, like, I don't see them trading him to Chicago. They're not going to trade him in the division.
Right.
I disagree with the mindset sometimes, but I don't think they're going to trade a franchise quarterback in the division. I don't think the Colts are going to give up a first-round pick for him. I'm trying to go through the list ahead here. I could see maybe the Chargers giving up a first-round pick for. No, they're not going to give up a first-round pick because they have the sixth pick in the draft. They're going to take Tua. So I don't see a lot of teams giving up a first-round pick for Stafford unless they're really desperate or if they lose someone like Brady, Dak for whatever reason. I don't see him going anywhere.
Yeah, the only scenario I can think of that maybe he would leave is if, let's say, Chase Young gets drafted and then maybe you have an opportunity for like a Joe Burrow or a Tua, or maybe Tua is just there. Maybe you decide that's the best value you want to get Tua. I could see something like that happen, but I think they really just trade back and keep Stafford. That just makes sense to me. But what about Derek Carr?
Right there. Derek Carr?
What's that?
Yeah. Or just take Okudah there, honestly, if they don't find a deal good enough.
Right.
Derek Carr, I'm very much in on Las Vegas. That's going to take a while to get used to saying.
Yeah. I still haven't gotten used to San Diego. So
Yeah, exactly. The Vegas Raiders, the Raiders, I guess. The Darth Vaders are. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense for Derek Carr. Um, you know, I don't really know how I feel about this Raiders team. I guess you can say Gruden's kind of doing the right thing here, and he's kind of having the team in the right direction, the franchise in the right direction. Um, I just don't feel like they're good. That's my problem, and
hmm.
I don't think this team's going to be good for a while. And I don't really see them wasting a lot of. I mean, I could see Gruden wanting to pull the trigger, but I don't really see this team wasting a lot of assets to get a quarterback when they're still probably a couple years away from competing against a team like Kansas City in their own division. I don't see them really pulling the trigger on that.
Yeah, I think one thing I actually like Derek Carr. I think he's underrated. Again, like I said earlier, he's on a reasonable contract. You can definitely work with that. I think their defense, if I remember correctly, it was third worst in DVOA last year. It was definitely not a great defense. I think some of the statistics don't look as bad because just the way that they, run heavy offense, a lot of running, a lot of short passes. So they sort of shorten the games, which don't give up as many yards, then not as many points. But I do think that losing Antonio Brown hurt them. I think that if they can get a true number one receiver, I think he was meant to be a big part of their offense. I also think Perfect was meant to be a big part of their defense. Granted, you could say, why are you putting a bunch of faith into a couple of head cases? But at the same time, it worked out well for Richie Incognito. So, you know, I definitely think they're at the very least, I think they could maybe compete, but we'll have to see what they do this offseason.
How did we not get a sitcom into that locker room with Incognito, Perfect, and Antonio Brown all on one roster? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, well, we had Hard Knocks, but then they
You should.
my oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say they should have just roomed those three, and like
Mhm.
during training camp, and Jacobs in there, and let Jacobs like get his first feel of the NFL, having to live with these three people. Be like, what did I just get myself into?
Yeah,
Oh
that would have been
man,
good. I could definitely
yeah.
see that.
I mean, in
Uh,
in all seriousness, though, I feel like Derek Carr can like. There's no reason that in a good offense or with a good team around him that Derek Carr can't be like an Alex Smith type. I don't think he's that bad. So I can agree that he is going to stay in Las Vegas in this one.
yeah, I agree. I think and one other thing, I kind of feel like with some of these teams, it's like you have something that's solid. Don't just try to hope. There's only a couple of quarterbacks in the NFL that are going to win you a championship. Most guys you have to build a team around. I think Derek Carr is the second category. You can win a championship with him. You're not going to win a championship because of him, but I still think he's worth keeping. And
Yep.
then another thing, I think this is a team we brought up is the Colts, and I actually think that they're just going to stick with Jacoby Brissett and not get another quarterback. That's what I think they're going to do. What do you think about that?
Interesting. Who? I actually forgot to write him down. I didn't write him and Andy Dalton down,
Well,
but
he does have a year
I
left on his contract, and so does Andy Dalton,
yeah.
but they're kind of you know, in that bubble of could go.
Yeah, most likely to go. Honestly, it seems like.
Hmm.
Or this one, I'm on the fence about. This Colts team is just so good. Like, how patient are they going to be with a guy who might actually be mediocre? Because this team is so talented. They got, a really good defense. They have the highest paid slot corner in the NFL or something like that with Kenny Moore. They have, great linebacking core. I don't see them. I don't know how patient they can be with this kind of roster. Obviously, the whole Andrew Luck situation derailed what this team could have been. But I think this team's actually primed to like with Bill O'Brien still in Houston, this team's kind of primed to actually take control of the AFC South because the Titans have so many free agent questions that if they did take control of the AFC South, they could be good for multiple years with this roster that they have put together.
Yeah, it's a division up for grabs for sure. It seems like every team in there is they don't have any dumpster fires, but they don't have any great teams either. And I do agree with what you're saying. I do think one key problem was that the receiving core got very injured towards the end of the season, and he didn't have a lot to throw to. And I think that it would make sense to move on from Jacoby Brissett to some degree, but I just think they're content with him. I think that everything I've heard, I think they like him, and I do think that again, I do think he's not terrible, but I do think you're right. I think he's mediocre.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I had one guy written down for the Colts that it looks like he's on your list. So I guess we'll get to him in a second. That I think makes a lot of sense. Um, but yeah, I mean, we'll see. But I just feel like that team can be really good really quickly if they have the right guy in place.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree whatsoever. I definitely think so. And now we'll move on to Andy Dalton. And thank God we have a team with a very easy to draw logo. Just C right there. I think it's going to the Bears. I think Chicago, uh, they're just a team right now where are kind of desperate actually, because I do think that the clock is running out on Matt Nagy, and he needs to, I do think there's a very real chance if they go 5-11 again, this could be his last year as a head coach for the Chicago Bears. And I think that Andy Dalton is definitely an upgrade from Mitchell Trubisky, no doubt about it. And I think they'd be willing to give maybe a third or possibly even a second, despite the fact they don't have much draft capital. They do have an extra pick. I believe it's an extra second round pick. Was that last year?
Um, I'm not sure what their draft situation's like. I thought they had an extra pick.
Yeah, I think they do too. Yeah. So you can use that pick, get Andy Dalton, have a quarterback who I think they have more problems on that offense, no doubt about it. But I do think that can be an immediate upgrade from in the most important position in football.
Yeah, I actually like this pick. I think it makes a lot of sense. I had the Bears kind of striking out on a lot of the free agent quarterbacks available, and especially with Trubisky there, this gives Trubisky a real competition, but it also doesn't put him in a situation where it's like, ah, crap, now Brady's here. What do I do now? So he's really going to work for the job, and you might get the best out of Trubisky with the competition. I think that makes a lot of sense for him, and I think that makes a lot of sense for Dalton. It's kind of like, okay, this is your last shot, Andy, go for it, and we'll see what happens. Because that's another team that is really good. They're probably one or two pieces away from potentially being a part of the conversation for the whole thing.
Yeah, no, and I think that it's one of those things too, where it's like, if I'm Ryan Tannehill, would I rather go to the team that has a great offense or a team that has a great defense, but not many offensive pieces? And so I do think that they're not going to be able to necessarily have their pick of the litter. I think they're going to have to, uh, you know, I think there's better options out there, but I do think it's an okay option. I just, quite frankly, I mean, their offense dropped from a top 10 offensive line to a bottom 10 offensive line in 1 year. They're going to have to improve their offense as a whole, not just the quarterback position, because I do think they could become a Jacksonville Jaguars situation where they go out and get a quarterback thinking that'll solve all their problems, and all it did was make their problems worse. But I like that pick, and now we'll move on to the last guy I have on this list. That's Cam Newton, and it's so hard to predict Cam Newton because we don't know how healthy he is. And if he's healthy,
Yeah.
I see there being no way Carolina gets rid of him. And I'm just going to bank on that. So I'm going to go Carolina, but I can definitely see this one I don't feel strongly about.
The drawing or the pick.
Well, I don't feel strong about any of these drawings, but the pick is we'll go with both. A beautiful drawing.
Yeah,
Look at that. Is
there you
that the
go.
real logo, or is that just something I drew?
I can't tell them apart, honestly. So this is the one that I had for the Indianapolis Colts. I don't think it's going to take a lot to get Cam Newton draft pick wise, just based on the situation he's in, the situation the team's in. I think it might take a third or fourth round pick to get Cam Newton. And when you can get a guy as talented as Cam Newton for a third or fourth round pick, this is the kind of situation that the Colts could actually thrive upon after losing Andrew Luck in an unfortunate situation. Um, that really sounded like he died. Obviously, he just retired, but
Right. Honestly, a good situation for him, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think Cam Newton to the Colts makes a lot of sense, and he's kind of a guy that can make. The best thing about the Colts too is that's a really good offensive line. His shoulder will probably stay healthy most of the year. Team that could be pretty dangerous with Cam Newton behind center. The Panthers, I feel like, are a team looking for a fresh start. I really like Rule as a coach, and I feel like with everything pretty much being new in the front office there, even the owners even fairly new there, I think it's time for a fresh start in Carolina. And I think I said Bridgewater to Carolina earlier. Yeah. So I think this is if they want a fresh start, this is the time to do it. And even if they decide to blow it up completely, there's a good quarterback class this year. There's a great quarterback class next year. If there's a time to really blow it up and like start over, this is pretty much it. Especially if you want to get yourself into the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes, this might be a good time for Carolina to say, okay, it's time to hit the eject button.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could definitely see that happening with the Panthers of just we're gonna do that. I do find that him going to the Colts, I find that very fascinating. That's something I hadn't really thought of too much, but I do think that can work because again, going back to the maybe their one weakness that they do have outside of quarterback is receivers. I don't know if that matters as much with Cam Newton, but again, it all just goes back to if Cam Newton is healthy, he's literally an MVP. But if he's not, I don't know if he can even be a starter. So definitely
Yeah.
a tough one. So now I figure we'll segue here. We'll move on to I think we're gonna do a draft right here. Each of us are gonna pick 5 free agent players who are not quarterbacks. So any position other than quarterback, our top 5, and we probably should have figured out a way to figure out who's gonna have the first round overall pick or not. I'll give you the first overall pick since I'm such a nice guy.
All right, so with my first pick, that was so graciously handed to me. With this one, I'm gonna go with the guy who's considered the freak of the NFL. You know, he's been hyped since he was going to the NFL draft. One of the best players on defense in all of football. Jadeveon Clowney. You know, obviously a big time free agent. He's gonna cost like a big time free agent, but this is the kind of guy that can go to a defense like a Khalil Mack when he's engaged, like a Khalil Mack, like an Aaron Donald. He can change an entire defense. He can change an entire defensive front, and he can affect the game unlike any other player in the NFL. Jadeveon Clowney is going to be my first pick.
Yeah, no, that's a great pick. I mean, he was number 2 on my board. I think that it's actually interesting. He only had 3 sacks last year, but he was so disruptive. You watch the tape, and you're like, how did this guy only get three sacks? Because he just disrupted so many plays. He was so close on so many plays. Just because he's not finishing doesn't mean he's not doing a lot. And definitely, I like the Clowney pick. I think that it'll be interesting to see if Seattle decides to sign him. But definitely a great pick, I think. And so now I have a pick. We'll go on to who I have number 1 on my board. And that is kind of the opposite. Kind of the guy who maybe won't blow up the play as much. But when he does get in the backfield, he's going to get a sack. And that's Shaq Barrett. He was the NFL leader in sacks last year. I think that it just listen, this guy led the league in sacks. It's pretty much what people would say is the second most important position in football would be an edge rusher behind quarterback. So I think you got to go with him here. And this just makes sense to me. I don't think he's a one-year wonder. I think the only reason this is his first year he's doing this is because this is his first year as a starter.
Yeah, I mean, I was a big fan of him this year. I actually had a number 3 on my board. Makes a lot of sense. You know, pass rushers are at a premium. You know, if you get him, you got to pay for him. And I think he's going to be he's an easy franchise tag for me. I don't know why Tampa's taken so long to franchise tag him, honestly.
Yeah.
And, especially when he's only done it 1 year, this seems like perfect for what the franchise tag is built for. You get another year to see if he can play at that production. And if not, you get him at a cheaper deal. I think Shaq Barrett makes a lot of sense for your pick. So we'll go with my number 2 pick. And with this one, I'm going to go with the best defensive back available in the free agent pool. I'm not going to go with Byron Jones here as the best secondary player in free agent. I like a lot of what he does playing the cornerback and safety, but I want a game changer in my secondary. So with my second pick, I'm going to go with Anthony Harris. Led the NFL in interception. I think he was tied with best defensive player in football, Stephon Gilmore, for interceptions last year, which led the league. And I think Anthony Harris is a game changer back there.
Yes, you are never going to let that Stephon Gilmore take go, are you?
I win. I definitely won that one. I think I had that. What did I have that 2 or 3 years ago that I told everybody that Stephon Gilmore was the best, and then it worked out?
It was 2 years ago. You said that he was the best defensive player in football, ahead of guys like Aaron Donald and Khalil Mack, was what you said. That was your take. And I think rightfully called you a moron, which I think was very fair. But you know what? In fairness, he is now a defensive player of the year. Not who I would have given it to, quite frankly, but he won it. And
Yeah, I mean that Devontae Parker game left a sour taste in
yeah.
everyone's mouth. But
Hmm.
I think up until that, he was, the biggest game changer on the best defense in football for 16 weeks of the season. I had no problem with the pick. He's still Pro Football Focus's number one rated secondary. Or the time I said it, he was the number one quarterback by Pro Football Focus, and I think he's in the top five again. But back to my pick, Anthony Harris, obviously a game changer in the secondary. He can play that center field role. He's going to make a lot of plays for your defense. I think that's a good pick for my defense I'm building here through free agency.
Yeah, definitely a good pick. Was on my top five. And now I'm gonna go with another guy. This is gonna be a left tackle currently playing for the Colts. Is Anthony Costanzo. I think that he's just a great pass blocking left tackle to be on the board. I think that there's going to be so many teams. A tackle is so hard to find, especially a good pass blocker. I just think that if you can find a way to get something like that through free agency, it's so hard to get a good tackle through the draft. So that's why teams love to spend money in free agency to get one because it is such a wild card. This is a guy who I think will be getting a big payday come free agency.
Is this the guy you're circling for Tampa Bay?
He's someone I'll be very interested in. I think that one of them would have to then move over to right tackle, either him or Smith. But absolutely, I would love if we got him, I would be very happy with that. No doubt about it.
Yeah, this is actually a really good time for a pass blocking offensive lineman because him and Joe Thuney are going to get a huge payday. And I think Joe Thuney was rated as the best pass blocking offensive lineman in football last year. So I'm okay with the pick. Obviously, the tackle position is very important, and Costanzo's obviously a good one. So for my next pick, I'm going a little off the rails here. Number 3 pick. I'm bringing analytics to football here.
Okay.
And if my team's not very good and I need to build through free agency, the best way to do that is to create a lot of turnovers and then shorten the game as much as I can. And the important way, so I have Anthony Harris in the backfield, in the defensive backfield, creating interceptions, clowning, wreaking havoc on the line of scrimmage. Then I'm going right here to the backfield where I'm going to make this game as quick as possible. I'm going to win this game 10-7, and I'm going to get Derrick Henry.
Okay, definitely.
I don't know how much.
I was gonna say he was number 4 on my board.
I don't know.
Go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. Yeah, I think Derrick Henry, what he put together last year, I think, in guys who went over 160 yards and multiple touchdowns in games, the last person to do it since him was like John Riggins or something like that. So how special his run was over that 4-game stretch speaks to how much of a game changer he can be. Even if I'm getting 2 years of really good Derrick Henry, I'm taking Derrick Henry and I'm, going to run the heck out of the football until his legs are gone.
Yeah, I think signing Derrick Henry is almost the equivalent of putting your life savings on black, where it's like it's either going to work out fantastic or it's going to work out terrible. He's the kind of thing where he's obviously an elite running back. He had over 1,500 yards last year, 16 touchdowns. But at the same time, it's the kind of thing where if you pay a running back, they could drop off at any moment, and it's a huge risk, which is why I had him a little bit lower on my board, but he was still top 5 as well. So absolutely, I'm not mad at that pick whatsoever. And now with my number, this is 6th overall, my 3rd pick. I'm gonna go Jack Conklin. He's the right tackle, played for the Titans last year, just 25 years old. Good run blocking tackle, which does matter. And again, I just think this comes back to the tackle position so important in football. If you can get a good one in free agency that is going to be good, I just think this makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me too. You can't fault anybody for picking a good offensive lineman, and that's another one there. Which I was going to go with offensive lineman here next, and I'm going with another great pass blocker. Joe Thuney, obviously, we mentioned him a little bit. One of the best pass blocking linemen in football. He plays a guard, so it's not quite as valuable as a tackle, but he's going to get a huge payday just simply off of what he can do pass blocking. And he's going to go to a great team that can either throw the ball really well, or he's going to be in a play action setting where he's going to be one-on-one against some of the best interior linemen, defensive linemen, blocking them in the passing game. And I think he's the difference maker in that position.
Yeah, no, I love Thunley. I think he's great. I think here's my one concern is, there's a long list of guys who have played very well for the Patriots, and then once they go to a new team, it doesn't work out as well. Are you concerned at all about something like that happening?
I guess a little bit. I feel like a lot of the Patriots players that don't work out to me are more of the skill position guys because they look for a particular set of skill position players, particularly wide receivers like the Deion Branch types and all that. That when they go elsewhere, it's kind of a different scheme where it's hard to like get the best out of a player who plays a completely different offense. I don't think offensive lineman is going to be that competition to where he's leading. Obviously, with Skarnecki being in New England, there's a lot of hype behind Skarnecki and the offensive line coaching there. But I think he's going to be able to take that to a new team and be really good and be really successful elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think my counter to that would be, what about Nate Soldier? I mean, he's someone, he hasn't been bad for the Giants, but he definitely hasn't necessarily lived up to the contract he got.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I was very happy when Nate Soldier left. I felt like when he was in New England, he started taking steps back and he started looking like he was kind of beat up. And you know, to me, that was out at the right time for New England. And usually, when they're doing these cost-cutting moves, it is because we're getting rid of maybe a year too early rather than 2 years too late. But I still feel like Thuney has a lot of good football left in him. I don't feel like he was taking regressing at all as of last year, and I still think he can be a very reliable lineman.
All right. Well, I do not hate that pick at all. He was definitely on my board. Now here with, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the 8th overall pick, my 4th pick. I'm gonna go with somebody who had a career year last year, and that was Eric Armstead. Now, he had never been really a household name whatsoever. He was always kind of a solid role player. Last year, he broke out, had 10 sacks. It seems like San Francisco is going to say, we do have an abundance of pass rushers, we'll let him go to free agency. I do think this is the kind of, it's one of those guys where he's done this for 1 year. So who knows if this is someone who maybe isn't quite as good as maybe his last year stats will tell you. But at the same time, his last year stats were very good. And if he can be a consistent 10 sack guy, that just has so much value.
I think he's actually in a position where a team's going to be really happy they get him for the number they get him for, because not only did he put together a pretty good year last year, he's still behind guys on my list like a Jadeveon Clowney, like a Shaq Barrett, like a Yannick Ngakoue.
Right?
I can't remember if I say his name right.
Yeah, that's good. You got
it. Yeah. So he's going to be taken behind those guys, and he might be able to be just as effective as a guy like Ngakoue or Barrett, and he's going to be at half the cost. And someone's going to be thrilled that they get him at that number potentially, and I think that's going to be a steal for one team down the line, as people are looking for their 4th or 5th option for an edge rusher, and that's going to be him.
Yeah, exactly. And Ngakoue, it was between those two guys. I actually think that they're very similarly talented players. I think that I think Armstead can be a consistent 10 sack guy, and the contract was why I went with Armstead over Ngakoue. So now for the 9th overall pick, your last pick, who do you got?
I need a guy who's going to do the dirty work. I'm going to need a guy who just works the middle of the field, is able to stuff some running plays for me, take on 2 or 3 guys. So I'm going with DJ Reader with this one. The defensive tackle out of Houston, obviously, his numbers aren't going to blow off the page, but that's just because his role is to take up space, and he's really good at taking up space.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that it's one of those things where it's the fans might not notice you, but your opposing teams definitely will when they game plan. He's definitely going to, I think, get a big payday. Very good player. And now we'll move on to my number 10 pick. I just mentioned him. Might as well just bring him up. It's going to be Yannick Ngakoue. I just think that for Jacksonville, he has been a very good player. He's also someone similar to Armstead, where he has played in a good system. But I mean, I was watching tape from him when I made a video not too long ago about him. And I mean, Josh Allen, his big selling point when the Jaguars drafted him was he's fast. He has the speed. And Ngakoue just making him look slow out there with how quick he is. I mean, he's definitely got all the tools to be a great player. It seems like he will get traded, so it's kind of like, is he really a free agent or is he because he's going to get tagged? But yeah, I think if we're putting him on this list, he definitely deserves to be on the list, I think.
Yeah, he was also on my list, and the pick makes a lot of sense. I think at the end of the day, what's going to happen is he's actually a guy that I think is going to get signed by somebody else and put together a really big year. Just because I feel like anybody who's going to lead that Jacksonville situation is going to be really good next year because of how bad that Jacksonville situation was. So I
Was
think
it so
he's one
bad
of the.
though? Was the defensive line so bad though? Because I feel like that's kind of the one area where it might actually have been a good thing to play for.
I still feel like, I don't think the talent was bad, but I still feel like that overall it seemed kind of like a toxic situation that nobody was really happy to be at. And I think he's made comments this offseason about, somebody come get me or something like that. And
Hmm.
this is a situation where I do think that there are players out of Jacksonville that are going to be able to hit another level. Because I think, what did he end up with, 8 sacks last year? And I think that's some.
I'll check. Oh, good.
Yeah. But yeah, I think he's going to be one of those guys from that team that steps up and performs at a very high level because he is a premier level pass rusher when he's engaged. And who knows actually how engaged everyone was in Jacksonville last year.
That's a very good point. Yeah, he had 8 sacks last year. He had 9.5 in 2018. Also had an interception last year. So, yeah, definitely a talented player. So, just rereading the list, we had Clowney go number 1, Shaq Barrett number 2, Anthony Harris 3. Then it was Anthony Costanzo 4, Derrick Henry 5, had Jack Conklin 6, Thurney 7, Eric Armstead 8, and then DJ Reader followed up by Yannick Ngakoue. So that's the list. A couple honorable mentions, Byron Jones on there. But there's some stats that I'm looking at that just makes me, it's sort of a buyer beware. For one thing, in his time with Dallas, he's given up 20 interceptions to just 2 interceptions, or excuse me, 20 touchdowns to just 2 interceptions, which is definitely not a great stat. Also has an away passer rating against of 97, which granted he's going up against number 1 receivers. It's going to be higher than a number 2 corner. But still, I think that there's actually something it's a theory I have about the Dallas Cowboys, which is I think that because they play in such a big market, that now all of their good players get talked about as if they're great players and they get bigger
Mm-hmm.
contracts. What do you think about that theory?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with it too. I wasn't really honestly overly impressed with Amari Cooper last year either.
Hmm.
Obviously he had that hot stress as soon as he got traded to Dallas, and everyone was going crazy about, oh, this is an elite level guy all of a sudden. But not that he was bad in Oakland, but he was, he looked like a number 2 receiver in Oakland, and there was a
Hmm.
lot of stretches this year where he looked like a number 2 receiver, and he's going to get paid like a number 1 guy. I'm not really for that, and I'm kind of in the same way with Jones. It's really hard to tell really what the ceiling is for this guy because he's talked about that he should be a top 5 cornerback in football, but I don't see a top 5 cornerback out of him. And I don't really know, is this going to be another situation where Jerry Jones is going to be the only person dumb enough to pay him? And so he's just going to wait till Jerry pays him? Because it kind of seems like that's the direction everyone's going in with these Dallas players.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, exactly. Seems like we're on this exact same page here. I just think that right, it's like people sort of just have when they're talking about all the Dallas free agents, he gets thrown in there and he gets talked about. But I think that largely it's just because when the casual fan watches a football game, he's not on the screen for most of it. But I just don't see him as a top 5 corner. I think if you want to pay him, don't break the bank paying him. And I think somebody is going to. They're going to overpay for the name brand, and I think that's going to be a mistake. Just let's see who else. I also had another honorable mention, Brandon Sheriff of the Washington Redskins, 3-time Pro Bowl guard.
Yep.
Definitely a very good player. Did you have any honorable mentions as well?
The only one was really I wrote Chris Jones down, but I believed he was getting franchise tagged, so I
Yeah,
just didn't
same.
even bother taking the time to talk about him.
Hmm.
Obviously, if Chris Jones is on the list, he's probably going 1, 2, or 3 for me.
Hmm.
So, but obviously with the whole franchise tag situation, he wasn't listed. Outside of that, let me see here. I had Um, I was curious about Austin Hooper. I was curious about if either one of us would end up putting him in our top five. I think he can be a really dynamic tight end. He has all the tools to be, you know, this was obviously his career year, and you question career years during free agency years.
Mhm.
Um, but he has all the tools to be a really good tight end. He's fast. He's got great hands. He blocks fairly well. He's not an elite level blocker or anything like that.
Mhm.
But he can make plays, and I do think that someone's going to get him. He's probably going to get overpaid a little bit, honestly, but they're going to be happy with the production out of him from the tight end spot.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the one worry I would have maybe is he a product of Matt Ryan playing in a good an offense that gets a lot of passing yards? But I think he's very good. I do think that is he going to get overpaid? Probably, but that's what you have to do in free agency is you have to overpay for guys for the
Yep.
most part, or maybe find a diamond in the rough, but that rarely happens. The one thing I want to go back to a little bit, just with the few minutes left that we have, is about the Derrick Henry thing. I figured we could get a little bit more into that about do you think it makes sense to sign a guy like that if for the Tennessee Titans from their perspective? Should they keep Derrick Henry or should they look to move on from him?
I don't know how I would feel about paying running backs anymore. Or, honestly, I think that the way running backs are going to work is going to change. And a lot of these people are asking for stability. But what happens if we just start changing the running back contract situations to where we're giving these running backs like 2 years, $30 million a year and say, look, we're going to maximize your profit for these 2 years because you're an elite level guy now, but I'm not guaranteeing you're going to be an elite level guy at the end of 2 years. So it's still kind of a minimal risk because of just how long, you're not sure how long a running back's lifespan is going to last. And the running back is looking to make as much money as possible before that lifespan ends. And I think that's going to be an interesting medium to how these running backs are going to be paid if they just try to maximize those profit in short term contracts. As far as Henry goes, it's interesting to see. I feel like some of the guys who have lasted longer in terms of the running back position are these bigger guys. Obviously these Marshawn Lynch years in Oakland haven't been good, but and this past time with Seattle, the last few games where he was taken off the street,
Mhm.
but I do think he was productive for many years, probably longer than the average running back is for his age. And I feel like Henry's kind of in that boat where he kind of has the size that he can be an effective player, whether it's, eventually he's a red zone kind of guy because of his size to where he can make a difference like that. But I question giving long-term high-paying contracts to running backs ever just because of the fluctuality of the situation with them.
Yeah, I'm usually the same way. Usually I don't like paying, even look like Todd Gurley, for example. That seems like an obvious guy to try. If you're going to sign a running back to a long-term deal, that seems like the guy, good runner, very effective, obviously MVP candidate, but then he just gets an injury and then it's looking like a terrible contract.
I had no problem with Todd Gurley getting paid at all. I feel like the issue with Todd Gurley was that when they paid him, they easily could have waited a year and then paid him the contract that they gave him because he wasn't ever going to say no to that kind of money. Um, but overall, wait until the very last second to pay these running backs because when they fall, it happens like that. So at this
Mhm.
point, I'm okay with Henry getting paid, especially what are the Titans going to do? They're going to pitch to their fans that they're going to go with, AJ Dillon or something from Boston College to replicate
Mhm.
that just because he's a big running back coming out of college. I don't see that working out.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's the downside about the Tennessee Titans is just what do you do if you don't pay Derrick Henry? You're not a team you're kind of built around Derrick Henry in a lot of ways. So that's my biggest reason why they should get him. But let me play devil's advocate for a second and say give you some reasons why they shouldn't sign him. For one thing, literally we're talking about 9 great games here that he's been, because if you look at he played 18 games last year or 19 games last year including the playoff, but in his first half of the season he averaged 71.6 yards per game with just a 3.9 yards per carry. His last 9 games of the season, it was 141 yards per game with 6 yards per carry. So there was a huge jump. Most of that, the last 6 of those games, was Ryan Tannehill, 6 or 7, I believe, was Ryan Tannehill. So that obviously played a factor. But is there some concern about not only are you going to be paying a big contract to a running back, but a big contract to a running back who's only had a half season of success? Really, I mean, of great play.
Yeah, that's fair. It's hard because you have no comeback for that because I mean, what do you say? I mean, obviously this elite level player where he's had these you know, borderline LaDainian Tomlinson level of production was only from the second half of that last year. And you can obviously pay him for being a good running back, but what is the good running back rate compared to the great running back rate at these days? And he's definitely someone it's gonna be interesting to see because I feel like this is going to set the market for multiple years on what free agent running backs with big years are going to get paid. Obviously, there's guys like Christian McCaffrey's coming up, I believe, and he's going to be looking at what this guy's getting paid and saying like, "Hey, I do all this production and I receive. I should get right around this guy, if not more." So this could be a market setter for where these elite level running backs are getting paid, even if he only did it for a half season.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're definitely right about that. It's such an interesting thing, I think. And also, I looked it up. So Marshawn Lynch, even in his years in Oakland, rushed for 4.3 yards per carry and 4.2 yards per carry. So wasn't terrible in Oakland. But everything you do in football is a risk. No matter what decision you make, there's a chance it could go very well, chance it could go very poorly. And I do think that the Derrick Henry is an ultimate risk. But if it works out, they are a playoff contender and maybe even a championship contender, depending on how their young players develop. Whereas if they don't sign him, I do think that they end up just being back in mediocrity, going to maybe a fifth straight 9-7 season.
Yeah, at this point, I feel like that's the move you got to make. You got to say, there's a chance for us to be pretty good, even if it means being pretty good in the era of the Ravens and Chiefs. We're still going to be a competitive football team. We're going to give these teams some problems at the end of the day, and we're going to maybe pull off a few upsets in the playoffs. Anything can happen in the playoffs. It's all about getting there at this point. And this team proved that on defense and, shortening the game like that, plus, making 5 good throws out of your quarterback, they're good enough to make the playoffs and make a run towards the Super Bowl. They came up short, obviously, in that Kansas City game, but they're plenty capable of making it happen with this roster.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we're on the same page there. So I guess with that, we will end this podcast. First podcast in the books. Kyle, thanks for coming on.
Yep, thank you.